What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. So, Star Wars games these last 10 years have had a wild history under EA. Everybody knows about the Battlefronts and the Jedis, but we don't always talk about the many mobile games that have come and gone. Some of them did not get the spotlight they deserved because there were some absolute bangers that are sadly no longer supported, and now we can't play them anymore. A few of them are even canonical in the Star Wars timeline, but since they can't be played, there's a lot of fans who will never get to experience them, at least until somebody cracks that data and puts it out there for us again. I know I didn't get to play all these games, and I doubt you did either, so today we're exploring some of the best mobile Star Wars games that we missed out on and might never get to play again. There's some wild lore behind some of them too. Zombie stormtroopers? We got zombie Palpatine, so I guess it's not that crazy. What was crazy was the lack of marketing for these games. It was historically bad for pretty much every title we'll talk about, and it led to them having a much shorter life than they deserved. The only game in today's video that excels in that department is our video sponsor, our friends over at Raid Shadow Legends. It may not be a Star Wars game, but it's basically Galaxy of Heroes if Go had elves and orcs instead of Jedi and Sith. There's powerful champions on the roster like My Spirit Animal, Turvold the Barbarian, Sikia Flametongue who dishes out the burn damage that won't go away, and Battle Sage for the constant healing buffs. There's a brand new series in Raid 2, Call of the Arbiter, and Episode 1 is available right now. To bring it in, Raid is going to be adding a lot of the new characters that you'll meet in the series as champions in-game, so you can get to know them as you get further in the series. One of these new champions is the fearsome orc warlord Artak, and he'll be available to everyone just by logging into Raid for 7 days between now and July 24th. There's plenty of time to claim this badass new champion. There's a lot of content upcoming in this limited series, and if you've seen episode 1 already, you'll know exactly who Artak is. But if not, I can't spoil it here. Be sure to download Raid Shadow Legends and check out Call of the Arbiter episode 1, and all will be revealed. And if you use my QR code at the top left, you'll also get an epic champion Talia and some other bonuses like an XP booster and energy refills. Thanks again to Raid for sponsoring the video. So, I'm not too sure about gameplay, but as far as graphics goes, Force Arena by Netmarble was probably the best mobile Star Wars game that has ever been released. This real-time strategy game had exactly 2 years of a live service, beginning on January 12, 2017, and ending January 12th of 2019. It looked great for a mobile game, and it offered chaotic but competitive arena gameplay with a huge roster of characters from the franchise. The full 3D models gave this game an edge over some of the more cartoony-looking games at the time, like Star Wars Commander, and it made you feel like this could have actually been a bigger title if it were a console port. Force Arena was hectic, but it was really fun. The goal was pretty simple too. You had to destroy your opponent's turrets and shield generators before they could get to yours, and you had to deploy troops or creatures or other reinforcements to back up your leader character, who is the one that you got to choose at the beginning of the fight. There were a lot of characters to choose from too, and in the 2 versus 2 mode, you could make some pretty cool dream teams, like Snoke and Kylo Ren, or Obi-Wan and Commander Cody. And the best part was getting to play characters that you normally wouldn't get to in other games, like Kira from Solo. Besides the 2 versus 2s, there were several other modes available, but the classic ranked mode was the standard experience, with players fighting for rating points to get higher up in the leaderboards. It didn't seem like this game was the most well-known, which is interesting considering Netmarble is the same developers behind pretty big titles like Marvel Future Fight. You'll actually see as we go over the rest of these games that this is kind of a recurring trend with them, where people just didn't even know that they existed, and I think this honestly is what led to a lot of them losing their live service. If nobody's playing the game, then it's not worth keeping it up. We do know that Respawn Entertainment is currently developing a supposedly AAA RTS game themselves in partnership with a company called BitReactor, so if we're lucky, they might take inspiration from this classic and deliver an even better RTS experience. So most people are familiar with the Battlefront franchise, but not a lot of people know about the Battlefront companion app. And if you came into EA's Battlefront franchise starting with the second game, you probably missed this one entirely. The companion is a mobile title from EA that kind of flew under the radar, but it's exactly how it sounds. It was meant to go hand in hand with Battlefront 2015, with players able to log into their accounts and make progress on their game through this mobile experience. It's another one of those base defense games with waves of various enemies closing in to take out your base, and you have to set up defenses to keep everything back, but the cool part was your defenses were based on your in-game star card loadouts. Overcoming all the waves will clear the level, and there were hundreds of levels with different scenarios that could honestly lead to several hours of playtime. It was a pretty fun game, but it was really only worth taking the time to play if you had the accompanying account in Battlefront 2015. The credits and experience that you earned in the companion would actually transfer over to your real in-game account, which was pretty cool if you didn't have the time to sit down and play on PC or console. Sadly, Battlefront 2 never had a companion app like this, and it's really a shame because 2 was definitely way more successful than the first game. What's really crazy about this game though, compared to some others in this video, is that it's still available. If you really wanted to, you can download and play this right now since it's still up on the App Store. If it appeals to you, give it a try while you still have the chance, because who knows when EA will decide to pull the plug on this one. Could be tomorrow. Have you ever heard of Project Blackwing? It sounds like the kind of false flag conspiracy the United States government would come up with, but it's actually one of Palpatine's earlier attempts at immortality. Sith scientists created the Blackwing virus, an infectious agent that kills the host and reanimates the corpse. It's literally zombies in Star Wars, and this is actually canon thanks to Star Wars Commander. Commander was the absolute best, and out of all the games on this list, this one has a special place in my heart. It's Clash of Clans, with a Star Wars skin, and that's hard to beat. As far as a daily dose of the galaxy far, far away, this was all you could ask for. Commander was a really good game while it lasted, and it actually had a relatively long life compared to some of the other games in this video, with it switching development studios toward the end of the live service. It was released on August 21st, 2014, which made it one of the first titles to be released after Disney acquired Lucasfilm. And I have to say, this was one of the smarter releases that Lucasfilm had put out. Clash of Clans had already been huge for a while, so the only logical step was to copy that formula and just slap a fresh coat of Star Wars paint on it, and boom, you've got Star Wars Commander. It was made by Disney Interactive, and this game featured a single-player campaign that actually added some fun lore behind Tatooine and the Imperial forces stationed there. You played as yourself, a member of a two-man crew with another guy named Sapanza. Together, you help the rebel factions across Tatooine take out the Imperial garrisons by upgrading your base and destroying the Imperial bases. Eventually, you're able to move your base to different planets like Takodana, Hoth, or Dantooine, and the higher you grew in level, the better base defenses you could unlock, like high-level walls or powerful traps that called in airstrikes. Disney Interactive eventually shifted control of Commander to Zynga in 2018, but ultimately the servers shut down on June 12, 2020, and it was a sad moment for this one. I miss hearing my little droid buddy beeping at me from my pocket, letting me know that I had upgrades to make to my base. I definitely wish we could get this one back. It's also one of the few games to actually have some lore, so it's a shame that it's not around anymore. If you want to talk about lore though, none of the games on this list come close to Star Wars Uprising. This was a mobile action RPG that was set after the Rebel victory at Endor. It was an earlier mobile game that didn't get enough attention in my opinion because the idea is honestly great and the setup was pretty good. Sadly, it only lasted a year, so I don't expect a lot of you watching to have even heard of this one. The game follows the events of the Battle of Endor, with an Imperial blockade stopping travel routes between the Anowit sector, which is where Bespin and some other well-known planets are. The rebels are stuck on one side of it while the people of the Anowit sector are suffering under this blockade, so it becomes up to the smugglers, bounty hunters, and swindlers who are trapped with the good citizens of the sector to rise up against the Empire and help the rebels secure a victory for the galaxy. There was actually a really cool reference to this game in the Battlefront 2 campaign during the mission to Bespin. You can hear one of the stormtroopers talking about the blockade and the Imperial governor who's in charge of it. It's just little bits of lore like that which makes me feel like Star Wars takes itself seriously enough to just connect those dots. That's good storytelling the way that Lucasfilm intended when Disney first took over Star Wars. They were talking about telling stories that were interconnected through different mediums, including the comics and the games, and this is just one example where they did well by that, even if it's a small example. The trailers did not represent the gameplay, obviously, but they did set a cool tone, and it made this feel like a classic George Lucas creation, gritty and real and lived in, the same way that the original trilogy was. It's definitely an interesting piece of Star Wars lore that was set in a relatively unexplored time period. I'm just upset I never got to play it myself. Like I said, it only lasted a year, from September 10th, 2015 to November 17th, 2016. This was released right before The Force Awakens hit theaters too, so I'm sure it was meant to be a transitionary piece going into the era of the First Order. Now, I know what you're thinking, Star Wars Hunters isn't even out yet, and you'd technically be half right. Hunters does not have an official release date yet, but it has been in a soft launch phase for a few years now actually, with players able to install and play the game via a VPN. This is most likely going to be the next Star Wars game that gets released in 2023, if we follow what Lucasfilm Games have said regarding their intended plan of one major game release every year, accompanied by a smaller title. Jedi Survivor is obviously that major release for 2023, which still leaves the slot for this year's smaller game open, and chances are very high this will be that title that we end up getting toward the end of the year. Hunters is another arena brawler, this one featuring full 3D models of new characters that have their own powers and abilities. It's a competitive 4 versus 4 fighting game, and it's sadly been stuck in development for quite a bit. It was supposed to originally release in 2021, getting pushed back to 22, and now it's got pushed back even further, pretty much until further notice. There's not a set release date on the game yet, but like I said, you can still play it and get a feel for how it works. Plus, the developers are constantly patching it and giving the game updates to make it better. There's even been 2 new characters added since the soft launch began. The best part is any progress that you make now will reflect on your account when the game does eventually drop. Don't be surprised if you see some dedicated players with max levels on day 1 who have been grinding this game out since 2022. Hunters might not be what everybody was hoping for in a Star Wars game, but taking the heroes versus villains format from Battlefront 2 and making a whole game around it isn't that bad of an idea, and it might end up being a great game by the time it releases. There's 2 more games in this video, and these 2 never fully made it out of development, which was a shame because both of them had a lot of potential. The first one that we have to talk about is Star Wars Rivals, a mobile third-person shooter being developed by Disney themselves. This one actually did get a very short release. It was only ever out in Australia, New Zealand, and I believe in some areas of Canada from June of 2018 to September of that same year. It featured a short single-player campaign and player versus player gameplay, and it looked like it could actually be a really solid mobile experience. It was the first real mobile Star Wars shooter that we ever got. Unfortunately, the game suffered from what was apparently just really poor gameplay, and the initial reviews were awful. Players who got the chance to try it out said that it was insanely easy with very little skill curve involved. It was just point and shoot and move on to the next round and repeat kind of thing, and it got old really fast. A mobile shooter that actually has some strategy behind it would be a great way to mix it up, and that's why I've got high hopes for something like Hunters, but until that game is out, we'll just have to wonder what a good mobile shooter might look like. Rise to Power is the other story of development hell, and this one truly never made it past the development stage. There has not been an update on the progress of this game since February of 2018. Publicly, the last update that we got about Rise to Power was to tell us that it was going into a closed alpha testing phase and that EA was looking for players to test it out, but that hasn't changed since then, and there hasn't been any news about it. The game hasn't been getting any kind of support that we know of, it's just been dead in the water until further notice. It was being advertised as another strategy type of game set in the early days of the New Republic. Not quite a base builder like Commander, but something more akin to maybe Empire at War, which is easily the best RTS Star Wars game ever made, where you control a fleet and try to win PvP space battles by taking out your opponent's ships and resources. Honestly, the concept sounds really cool, and I wish the game would have came out, because if it was done well, this could have been another hit that lasted a long time, like Commander or Galaxy of Heroes. From the stills and screenshots, the graphics look top-notch, and what we've come to expect from a modern mobile game. And with some of the characters and concepts shown, there are actually a lot of similarities to Star Wars Squadrons. I could have seen this be a neat companion piece to the console title, just like the companion app to Battlefront. We never saw any gameplay of this one. We only have these few screenshots of menus and what could be some gameplay. Sadly, this is just another one of those titles under EA, just like projects Ragtag and Viking, that will most likely never see the light of the sun. Although there were some rumors of a new Star Wars mobile game being developed at EA, so with any luck, that might be the revival of Rise to Power, or at the very least, it'll use some of the assets from Rise to Power to make a whole new game. But guys, that's it. Those are some of the best Star Wars mobile games that have ever been released that I'm sure not a lot of you have actually played, or maybe even heard of. If you have played these games, let me know in a comment below. And if you know of any other Star Wars mobile games that I didn't talk about in the video, let me know about them. There might be some hidden gems that even I didn't know about. Once again, big thank you to Raid Shadow Legends for sponsoring the video. Thank you, the viewer, for coming and checking it out. If you enjoyed it, consider liking and subscribing. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.